Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mondays with Mundy. That's me, Jim Mundy, the historian for the Union League Legacy Foundation. So this episode is being broadcast on November the 22nd of 2021. And in November of 1862, a prominent Philadelphian named George Henry Boker was about to help create the city's most important institution during the American Civil War, the Union League of Philadelphia, with which you're all familiar. And surprisingly enough, we really don't know much about Boker. There's a Boker room, but we still don't know much about George Boker. So I thought we'll spend this episode talking about Boker himself. All right. So to do that, we're going to have a little PowerPoint. So let me share my screen. We do that. I better do this. And then we go there. Hot diggity dogs. All right. Just to go back up. Philadelphia's unexpected hero, George Henry Boker. So this is our hero. He was born October the 6th of 1823, and he died January the 2nd of 1890. He was born in Philadelphia, and he died in Philadelphia, like all good Philadelphians, right? So Boker was born into a very wealthy family of bank managers, if you will. The family, the Bokers, were originally Bocher, B-O-C-H-E-R. They were Dutch Protestant Huguenots, although that's usually French, but they've journeyed from the Netherlands to France, to England, and then from England to the United States. And here in Philadelphia is where they settled. And they became known as the Bokers, as you can see, from B-O-C-H-E-R to B-O-K-E-R. So young George, growing up in a wealthy family, was educated in private schools in Philadelphia as a young man, and then went off to the school where all proper Philadelphians sent their sons, and that was Princeton University. He matriculated in 1840, graduated in 1842, and while there, his course of study was in literature, because Boker had been a fan of poetry and the theater since he was a young man. Apparently, even in his childhood, he was quoting poetry all over the place. So that was the love of his heart, was literature. And he would become Philadelphia's most prominent literary man during his lifetime as well. But he would become some other things, and that's what we're going to talk about shortly. So he graduated in 1842 from Princeton University, came back to Philadelphia, where his father suggested that it might be more proper for him to become a lawyer. After all, it's more stable. You can make some money at it. After all, who was making money writing poems and plays at that point? So Boker studied for the bar and passed it, but never practiced law, although that would come in handy later on when he become an ambassador for the United States. So that's Boker. All right, this is him as a young man, and you can see by now his straightened hair in his first photograph is now his natural curly hair, and you'll see him that way for all the rest of his life. But a very handsome man, and at one point he was known as the handsomest man in Philadelphia, which is, I'm sure, didn't hurt when he married this young lady, Julia Riggs, from the Riggs banking family in Baltimore. So Boker came from a banking family in the sense that his father, Charles, had been the manager for the Girard estate when it was the largest estate in the country. And keep in mind that when Girard died in 1831, the estate was worth in 21st century dollars over $1 billion. And so Charles was the manager of that estate in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s until he died. Then he died in 1857. When he died, his son George inherited over $1 million. So from the Girard estate and the banks to the Baltimore banks with the Riggs family, the Bokers were well set in life. And this is where they lived. 1720 Walnut Street, and that's the right-hand side of the brownstone twin that you see here. It's just east of Rittenhouse Square. And on the left-hand side, 1718, that is where Bloomfield Moore lived, and Bloomfield Moore with Boker would become founding members of the Union League in December of 1862. But we'll get to that story later. So here's George Boker as a young man. Now, what did he do? If he didn't practice law, he had to do something, and he did. So in 1847, he wrote his first collection of plays, Lessons of Life and Other Poems, and which was critically received. I mean, he could write. And then in 1848, he wrote his first play for the theater called Kalenos, which opened actually in London before it opened in the United States. And over the next few years, he would write a series of plays, Anne Boleyn, Leonardo de Guzman, and his most successful play of all time, Francesca de Rimini, which was still being performed after he died in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and couldn't hurt to have it revived, would it though? But nonetheless, though, it established Boker as an American man of letters, right? So that's what he was doing with his time. And at the same time, though, he had also joined the Philadelphia Club. He was only 24 years old when he joined, shortly after he came back from college and married Julia. And the Philadelphia Club was becoming the most prominent club in Philadelphia. And that is it on the northwest corner of 13th and Walnut Streets in Center City, Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Club was the oldest charter club in the country, founded in 1834, and its members represented what I guess we'd call the creme de la creme, but the hereditary aristocracy of Philadelphia, as much as Philadelphia had one. So here it was family names that were important, because that was the aristocracy, right? And so Boker joined there as a very, very young man. In 1855, he joined the board of directors. So he's obviously a talented and serious man, young man, and he's moving into higher positions in life as well. Now, in 1856, the American presidential election pitted three parties against each other: Democratic, Republican, and American Nativist Party. So the American Nativists ran Millard Fillmore, who had previously been a Whig president of the United States. The Democrats ran James Buchanan, and Republicans, in their first American presidential election, ran John C. Fremont. Now, nationally, the Republicans won 33% of the vote. Pretty good. In Philadelphia, the Republicans only won 11% of the vote, which means that, in terms of its political context, Philadelphia voted for the two parties who were basically pro-Southern, therefore they were pro-slavery, they were anti-immigrant, they were anti-Catholic, and they were anti-Jewish. So that's Philadelphia at that point in time. And Boker was all part of that political culture and the political history of Philadelphia at that point in time. But somewhere between 1856 and 1860, Boker's thinking and philosophy began to change. And so he voted in the 1860 for Abraham Lincoln. We don't know how or why he had that political epiphany. It's not, I have not been able to find any evidence of it, but I think the only thing we need to know is that he voted for Lincoln in 1860, because that would help him become a founding member of the Union League of Philadelphia. And this is a quote from Boker. And this is what happened. This is, if you need if you need one reason to know why Boker helped create this patriotic social society called the Union League, here it is. After that, the sword was drawn. It struck me that politics had vanished entirely from the scene, that it was now merely a question of patriotism or disloyalty. And that was his reaction to secession. All right, you're one or the other. You can't be any. That's all there is to it. You're one or the other, and he was going to be a patriot, which is why he founded this patriotic social society called the Union League of Philadelphia. In early November of 1862, he and one of his best friends, John Innes Clark Hare, one of the great jurists of Philadelphia in the 19th century, were walking down Chestnut Street and decided that it was the time to create this society so it could counteract all the Confederate influence in Philadelphia, which was a southern city at that point in time. And if you've listened to previous episodes, you've heard enough about that. So the Union Club was organized in November of 1862, and then by 1862, after meeting on consecutive Saturday nights, so on December 27th of 1862, the Union League of Philadelphia is organized, and George Boker would become its spiritual leader for the rest of his life. So in 1863, Boker would become the club's first secretary, and he would remain that until 1871. And I would encourage every Union League member to come down to the Heritage Center, into the office, and pick up a copy of the first 4 annual reports written 1863, 64, 65, and 66. We have them duplicated in booklet form. And just sit there and read them, and you'll get an idea of how Boker's literary and writing talent, it just comes forth in these annual reports, writing about this patriotic society and what is important for the League to exist, and what its mission was, and what it needed to accomplish, and what its challenges were. Incredible reading. So please come down and do it. In the meantime, Boker was getting very much involved with the League at the same time. So here we see him with some other prominent Philadelphians. On the left-hand side, William D. Lewis. Next to Lewis, standing, we have Morton McMichael, who would become president of the League as well before Boker. But McMichael was also one of Boker's best friends. After all, McMichael was a newspaper editor, the North American. They had literary interest together and political interest. In the center, Henry Charles Carey, America's greatest political economist of the 19th century and a founding member of the League. Standing on the right-hand side, James Miller McKim, one of the city's most ardent abolitionists. And on the right-hand side, George Henry Boker, with curly hair. Still a handsome man. All right. So Besides being secretary, Boker sat on the board of directors from 1863 until 1874, and also then again in 1878. And then between 1879 and 1884, Boker was the president of the Union League. And by the way, during those same years, he was also the president of the Philadelphia Club. Well, what did he do in between? So in 1871, Boker was made, and this is Boker as he would have looked in his middle years, was nominated as minister to Turkey. We think of them as ambassadors today. And he served as ambassador to Turkey between 1871 and 1875. And after 4 years, he was named ambassador to Russia, a more prestigious post and one that was more to his liking. I think he related better to the Russian politics and culture than he did the Turkish one. But nonetheless, though, if you were to visit Boker's house in this time period, it was full of items that he brought back from Turkey. The rugs, the lamps, the furniture. So as much as he might not have liked Turkey, he certainly filled his house with it. So, but who knows? So so Boker's political career ended in 1875 when Rutherford B. Hayes came into office. He simply declined to continue Boker in his role as minister to Turkey. And so Boker returned to Philadelphia, where he continued to write poems and plays and become the city's leading man of letters as well. So this is Boker in his later years, certainly the proper Philadelphian, if you will. Now we have Boker again. Still love that curly hair, but you can still see, I think, the fire in his eyes, if you will. And so Boker died on January the 2nd of 1890. And this is an illustration taken from a pamphlet that was published at his memorial service. And at that service, a monody was read, an M-O-N-O-D-Y, which basically, is a poem lamenting the death of a person. And so this is the poem. I'm going to read it for you. I think you'll enjoy it. Under this mausoleum, killed by a white choker, requiescat in pace, sleeps worthy Dean Boker. A poet for princes, a prince of a poet, yet the priest of democracy, did he but know it. Alas, to choice wines and his ease he has given the genius that ought to have scaled even heaven. Speak low by his tomb, he was loyal and brave, and bewail a great prophet gone dumb to his grave. We'd all be so lucky if somebody wrote a poem like that about us, wouldn't we? So speaking of his grave, there it is. So George Boker rests comfortably at Laurel Hill Cemetery on Ridge Avenue in the East Falls section of Philadelphia. So I hope you enjoyed that very brief biographical episode on George Henry Boker. We could spend days talking about him, and maybe sometime we will. But in the meantime, I would encourage you to read the Bradley biography. It's in the League Library. It's also available online, as you can imagine. Not very expensive, unfortunately. So, and if you're in the League sometime, I know we have other resources in the Heritage Center about biographical resource on Boker himself. So come down and read some, but do come down and read those annual reports. They're just pieces of literature in their own right. So thanks for watching another episode of Mondays with Mundy. Hope you enjoyed it, and we hope to see you in 2 weeks. So in the meantime, stay well, everybody, and happy Thanksgiving. Bye now.